Welcome, welcome. Today we're going to address terrible crap plant advice that should be yeeted from the universe, or at least clarified, because some of it may actually sound like it's a little bit logical, but it might be a bit trappy. So today I'm going to be addressing 10 pieces of advice that aren't really stacking up to the science. So let's get into it. We're going to have some fun with it today, keeping it pretty light. We're not here to disparage anyone, but we're still going to have a bit of a laugh about some of the advice that's out there. But if you stay to the end, I'm actually going to give you a bonus tip, and it's the one that I think that everybody still thinks is a good tip, but it's not. So don't follow any of this advice. It's just rubbish. We can all do better. So if you too have heard bad plant advice, pop it in the comments. I would love to hear the absolute rubbish that you guys have heard that has been either given to you directly or that you've read somewhere that is terrible advice. And also do let me know if you followed some advice which later turned out to be not quite good. Who's done that? I've done that. I've done it more than once. It's okay. We're here to learn. But this advice needs to be yeeted. In the bin, gone forever, out the door, gone. And we're going to be getting out my favourite mug today because I'm feeling somewhat a little bit feisty about some of the advice that I'm going to be giving. This is the stuff we're going to sort out. Facts, not. Thank you to Emily D. Baker for giving me this beautiful mug. So let's get into it. First piece of advice. Drainage holes aren't needed. If you put rocks in the bottom of it or a layer of pebbles and stone, that's all you need for drainage. Nope, that's not right. That's not right. This plastic pot with no drainage. We put, say, a layer of rocks in here, up here. And then you put in your soil, you put in your plants. Life's hunky-dory. And then it comes watering time. So you do a nice big water. How do you know exactly how much to put in the pot before it starts seeping into the soil column? Do you have any idea? Can't see. The water can't drain. This is a myth. In reality, what you're going to end up with, because no one is perfect with their watering, is you are going to end up with a waterlogged layer. And after a while, it's probably going to smell. That's rot. So always use pots with drainage holes and make sure that your soil is a well-drained mix. I've done a video on my go-to potting soil. I will put it in the description below. If you haven't seen it, go check it out. And also one for succulents. So I'll put that down there as well. Whatever soil medium that you use, make sure that it's very well draining and you have drainage pots in here. And if you want to put it into one of these, great. Put the pot with the drainage holes into here, and then if a little bit of water goes into the bottom, you can take it out, dump the water, put it back in, life's hunky-dory. You don't really need to dechlorinate your tap water. That's crap advice. Yep. Yes, you do. Look, it won't necessarily kill your plant, but some plants are quite sensitive, particularly to chloramines and more so chloramines. Now, a lot of people will suggest taking your tap water, putting it into a bucket and letting it gas off the chlorine. That will work for the chlorine, but that won't work for the chloramine. Now, there's a whole other video about knowing what's in your tap water or whether tap water in your region and in your specific circumstances is safe for your plants. I'm not going to get into that today. That's a pretty advanced discussion. But what I will say is that chlorines and chloramines do need to be removed. Now, there's actually a pretty easy way to get rid of chloramine and chloramine, and you can do that by visiting an aquarium shop. They have products like Seachem Prime and water conditioners that enable fish keepers to use tap water and will neutralize these products as they're going into the tank. Grab some of that, use a little bit of it, and then your tap water will be chlorine and chloramine free. I'm going to need to put some wine in this for this one. For this particular group of terrible tips, and there actually are a few terrible tips sort of grouped into this one group of terrible tips, but I'm going to lump them in together. So that means you're probably going to get more than 10. This has to do with putting any sort of food stuff or food remnants or byproduct of the cooking process into your plant pot. Where this comes from I honestly don't know. But it is shit advice. It's really bad. And I'll give you some examples. I'll give you a couple of examples. Using mayonnaise or cooking oil to shine the leaves. Now, if you think about it, what would happen if you covered your whole skin in oil? You'd feel pretty greasy for starters. And what would happen if you went outside on a windy day? You would start attracting dust and dust would start sticking to you. That's exactly what's going to happen with your plant. It's also going to block the pores of your skin. And if you think about a plant, just like anything else, this is kind of like the skin of the plant. So we really don't want to be putting any sort of food or rubbish or allowing it to be attracted and stick to our skin. And we don't want to do that to our plants. When you're maintaining your plants, part of your plant care routine actually should be giving the leaves a wipe, because once dust and other things accumulate on there, photosynthesis can't do so well. A wet microfiber cloth is all you need. And it will also have the added benefit of putting a little humidity in the plant for a minute or two. Waiting for the plane to pass over. Waiting for the plane. Also shit advice. Don't film in the middle of the day. Also part of the grouped advice of don't use food stuff in your pot is, say you have some broccoli. What will happen if you boil broccoli is that when you take the broccoli out, you'll probably have a tinge of green in your water. And that's some of the nutrients coming out of the broccoli itself. I have heard advised to say, use that water on your indoor plants or on your plants because it will give the nutrients to them. What kind of audacity, stupid fuckery is that? That's just horrible advice. It's one of the worst care plant tips I've ever heard. Where is the scientific evidence? Please show me the scientific evidence that says that is a great idea. There is none. And that's exactly the same as putting a banana skin in your staghorn or your elkhorn. Oh, but it gives it lots of potassium, and elkhorns like potassium. All plants need potassium. You know what else it's going to bring? Fruit flies and possibly rodents. Don't do it. That sort of advice is designed to be clickbait. And honestly, some of it's just downright dangerous for your plants. Your plants are not going to go well. You're going to create an environment which will create odours, create unpleasantness, maybe create goo, and overall isn't really going to do your plant any better. You know what would do your plant better? Actual fertilizer. It has been scientifically formulated and tested. This is what we should be using with our plants. And if we didn't need to use these, everybody would throw food and their scraps into the garden. But that's not a good idea. It's a terrible idea. So no using leftover cooking water, no using cooking oils or vegetable oils for some sort of leaf shine replacement or as a cleaning agent. Actually, there are some exceptions about when you might use a cooking oil, but that has to do exclusively with creating something called horticultural oil. It's not to do with cleaning. Exceptional all-purpose fertilizer. A foliar spray. These are formulated properly to deliver all the nutrients that your plants require. Cheap plug for Australian viewers, I am launching these products in the shop on the 1st of June. So if you're interested in the fertilizer I recommend, this is it. But let's be done with that and let's get back to the terrible advice. Oh, there's just a whole lot of fuckery today, isn't it? Oh, and mayonnaise on leaves. Ugh. No food. No food. Keep food for you. Okay, so this one's an interesting one. This one's a very common one that I hear a lot and something I used to say myself. Underwatering is better than overwatering. I no longer say this because this is actually a common misconception. The difficulty here is people don't understand what overwatering and underwatering actually mean. In fact, I would like to see both of those terms yeeted and deleted from our vocabulary in these contexts. While overwatering, and again, I use the term very cautiously because you have to define what overwatering actually means. It can cause your roots to rot. Having the pebble layer that we just saw before with the pot, with the plastic pot and the pebble layer, and having that waterlogged layer in the soil profile, that can cause rot. Watering too frequently and having media that's too wet for a long period of time is bad. But so is underwatering. Underwatering is not good. Underwatering your plant leads to a very sick plant. Leaves will start dropping, leaves will turn yellow, leaves will die. And then eventually your plant will die. And also some types of media can become hydrophobic. Now, what does that mean? They start to repel water. If you let peat moss dry out too much for too long, it becomes hydrophobic, which means it starts to repel water. So you can water it all you like, the water's just going to run off the edges. You can't get the water into the soil profile, which means you can't get it into the roots. And sometimes you may have to sit there and actually sit and soak it and hold it underwater for quite a significant amount of time to stop that hydrophobia. Your plants need the right amount of water, and finding the balance between water, sunlight, and oxygen, that's the key. Oh man, overwatering and underwatering is a whole other video. Bottom watering is the best method to water your plants. See, here's the thing. It really depends on the type of media you're using. Some plants need to be in very chunky media. And if you use a lot of bark, it's not going to wick up the water because it's not really a very good wicking agent. So it's not always better across the board. When you're new, and if you're using a simple soil recipe and you're learning how to water your plants, yeah, sure, use bottom watering. It's a pretty good method, but it's not always going to be the right method or the smartest method. Sometimes you're going to have to water from the top. It's also not very good or useful when you have a plant with roots that stay on the surface or stay just below the surface. Again, you're relying on the fact that all of that water goes evenly from the bottom to the top, and that's not always the case. Gravity will work against that. So while a plant's soil may wick, gravity is causing the opposite reaction to keep the water down in the bottom layers of the profile. So in plants like some succulents, string of pearls, string of turtles, plants that have their roots just below the surface, they may never actually see any of that water when it's being bottom watered. It may never reach the top layer of the profile. So make sure you know the structure of your plant and how it grows, and use the watering method that is most appropriate for your plant. So if you're getting any enjoyment, or if these tips are helpful for you, please give the video a like. It will really help the channel. Consider subscribing. And now let's get back to more plant tips. The next terrible plant tip is all about fertilizing your plant immediately after it's been repotted. Yeah, I wouldn't, I don't, I never have. The plant has just moved house. Transplanting a plant from one pot to another, no matter how you do it, always adds stress to a plant. It puts it into stress. And you never, ever, ever want to fertilize your plant. It's 100% well. It's not sick or stressed in any way. It needs time to acclimate to the pot. So I personally never fertilize my plant or never give it anything, including things like sea salt or any sort of fertilizer or hormones whatsoever, until a month has passed. And then I can move back into the normal fertilizing regime. Just water it. Once you've potted it into the new pot, give it a good thorough water soaking. Make sure everything, the whole media is wet. And for the next 4 weeks, just let it do its own thing. And when you see signs of active growth, that's when you reintroduce the fertilizer. Because unless a plant is in actual growth and growing, actively growing, it doesn't need the fertilizer. The fertilizer will just sit in there unutilized by the plant, and it will sit there in the form of salts, and that can be bad for the roots. That can cause burning. Ah, yes, I love this one. Don't repot the plant. It loves to be pot bound. So out in nature, in the vast outdoors, out in nature, do you think houseplants, where they grow, do you think they're constrained by a pot? Or do you think maybe perhaps they have room to move out and go exactly where they want to go? Because I'm pretty sure there ain't no one out there going around to all the plants. No, you can only be in here. We'll push your roots together and constrain you. Keeping your plant pot bound is very detrimental, and repotting is essential for the long-term health of your plants. Plants need to develop a new root system all the time, and they need to have the room in the pot to do that. Eventually, all of the media will be gone, and I've seen this. I'll see if I can pop a picture of it, but there was no soil left. No soil left at all. It was just all dead root. That's all that was in the pot. We couldn't get it out, so we had to break the pot. The pot was in the shape of a pig, so the entire root system was in the shape of a pig. That was a crappy situation. Plants need media for their roots to grow in, and the roots need to have enough room to be able to develop a strong root system. So no, don't keep your plant pot bound for too long. Some plants like to be a little bit tight, but not for very long. That'd be like putting a 6'9" person in a single bed for a 12-year-old and saying, "Sleep well." How am I doing? Have I said too many cursey words yet? Nope. Always keep your indoor plants indoors. Where do you think they grew originally? Outdoors. Why do we keep them indoors? The advice that I've heard says they won't do well outside. Provide them the conditions that they like to grow in, and they'll do awesomely outside. Every year I particularly put my snake plants out the front. From spring to autumn, a lot of my indoor plants go outside, and that's where they do their best growing. Do I want to put them in full sun? Nope. So yes, they can thrive inside, but they can really thrive outside. So don't follow that one. Don't be afraid to put your indoor plants outside. There's a lot of them that will need to come back in and be overwintered. 12, 14 degrees Celsius is a threshold for a lot of them. So if your overnight minimums drop below those temperatures, bring them back inside until the weather warms up again. You may have to provide some undercover or shade cloth, but yeah, put them outside, let them go. They'll do wonders for them. How many is that? Is that number 8 or number 9? Number 9 and number 10. All right, we keep going. Oh God, it's up to this one. Seriously, this one gives me a migraine every time I hear it. Watering your plants with ice cubes delivers a slow release watering method and is good for your plants. The vast majority of houseplants we have in our home are tropical houseplants. They do not like ice cubes being put onto the surface to cool down their roots and put them into shock, because that's pretty much what's going to happen. You'll put your plants into shock. And this particularly seems to happen around these types of orchids, these Phalaenopsis orchids. It's like, oh, just put an ice cube in there and let it just, and that's the best way to water it. No, please don't. These are tropical plants. Please don't. Please don't. Please don't put ice on there and let it melt through. That's a really, really horrible thing to do to the plant. The plant won't like it. Will it kill the plant straight away? No. Will it make it miserable? Yes. Will you make me miserable? Certainly. How this one keeps perpetuating, I don't know. But there are people who do believe it. So if you have been fooled, I am sorry. Please don't do it anymore. This is some of the most misguided advice in the extreme. With your tropical plants, please stick to room temperature water. If the water out of your tap is particularly cold, put a little bit of warmer water in there as well, just to take the edge off. 20 degrees is fantastic. They love it. So I had to completely change everything around. I had to move the camera back down. I had to get this beautiful boy. I woke this beautiful boy up, so we'll see how this goes, because he has a thing about my microphone. This is the last plant tip, before the bonus one, and always rotate your plants to ensure even growth, because that's what they need to do well. And I've brought out my beautiful big Monstera elbow to prove how wrong this actually is. So this Monstera elbow has been climbing this pole and has a light source coming from the front, and i.e. the front that's being shown now. Back up, buddy. Back up. And if I'm to rotate this, you can see that I've trained this plant to grow in one direction. See at the back here? We've got all these beautiful roots that grow through the pole, out the pole, and honestly, into the pole next door. I do not rotate this plant at all. He moves whenever I have guests over. I bring him out and show him off, because a lot of friends know that I have this beautiful plant and they love to see it. So I bring him out and I want him to look his best. And I think he looks his best when all of this foliage is facing them, facing one way. Yeah, sure, I could rotate it and have foliage in all directions. But here's also another problem with doing that. I don't really want to take up a lot of space. To be full and beautiful when I'm looking at him, but to take up as little space as possible. And he lives next to a whole bunch of other plants that also are on poles. So they need to stay compact. So I want to make use of the vertical space without taking up too much horizontal space. So the way I keep this on a tall profile is to grow one way, and he doesn't sprawl out as much, and I can fit more plants. You can always fit more plants. So this is a bit of an aesthetic little trick. Now, would he look lush and beautiful if he had growth going all around? I'm sure he would, but I really like this look. It's my preference, it's my style for these plants, and you can do the same by allowing your plant to grow in one direction. With other plants, you'll absolutely want to have them growing evenly in all directions. Tree type structures, like ficus trees or fiddle leaf figs. You want them to be lush all the way around. So in those cases, sure, when you water it, rotate it a quarter of a turn. But do you have to do it that way because the plant needs it that way? No, you don't. You do you. You should do what makes sense for you, your preferences, your style, your limitations and space all need to be taken into account. The plant will be fine. So don't take the tip literally. And that's generally good advice for this whole video. A lot of these tips, the reason why they're terrible is because they're given out of context and people want to take things literally. The best rule to know is there are no rules. Rules can always be broken, and absolutes are absolutely a bad idea for this hobby. All right, bonus. You might be surprised about this one. Because this is something that a lot of people do, or a lot of people believe. And if I had $1 for every time I saw a plant channel saying that this is the best method for checking whether you need to water your plant, I would be rich. And if I didn't think I'd get a copyright strike, I'd put a little video montage together of all of the plant channels who have said over and over that this method is the best method for checking to see whether your plant needs watering. If you're not briefed on the finger test is where we use the top of our finger because it is quite sensitive and it can detect a lot of moisture. We put it down into the soil profile a bit, up to say the first knuckle. We want to get, the first layer or so. And if the first layer is dry, which it is here, we want to water the plant. It's actually not the best advice. Let's take this one. So if I put my finger in here and I feel the top layer is dry, great. What about the very bottom? The top layers will always dry out first. Then there's the center layers and then there's the bottom layer. So I may be very well fooled into thinking, oh, well, the top layer is dry or top layer and a half is dry. I can't feel any moisture. That means that this plant must need a drink. That is a very dangerous assumption, particularly when we bottom water. Because as I explained earlier, bottom watering may wick from your saucer or from your vessel up to your plant's roots, but it may never hit the top layers. So you're never going to feel anything but dryness. And if you water your plant again, then you're giving your plant water too frequently. And that's also why the term evenly moist is not really a thing. So it doesn't really matter whether you water from the bottom or water from the top. Gravity will eventually make sure that these layers at the bottom are always the last to dry out. So what are you going to do? Check from the bottom. Not always easy to check from the bottom to see if it's still moist. And checking using the finger test, it's dry. But I know that this plant does not need watering. And if I water it, I will be watering it too frequently. We can stop saying that the finger test is the best method for checking whether your plant needs a water. And we can confidently do that. Gravity, who knew? Oh, one more tip. Always fact check any advice you receive, even the advice you received today. I'm just a random person on the internet. My tips could be crap. I mean, I don't think they are. They seem to work for me. Thank you everybody for watching today's video, and I'll see you in the next video.